The sound of shattering crystal echoed through the marble hallway of the $20 million Manhattan mansion. 8-year-old Damian Moretti stood amid the glittering fragments of what had once been a priceless baccarat vase, his small chest heaving with rage and unshed tears. "I hate you!" he screamed at the terrified Nanny, who was already backing toward the door. "I hate everyone! Go away!" But Serena Vasquez didn't move. Instead, she did something that shocked everyone in that opulent prison of grief. She sat down on the cold marble floor, right next to the broken pieces, and began to speak in a voice as gentle as a lullaby. "You know, Damian," she said softly, her slight Mexican accent wrapping around his name like a warm embrace, "when I was your age, I broke things too. Not because I was bad, but because sometimes our hearts hurt so much that we don't know what else to do with all that pain." From the shadows of the doorway, Tomas Moretti, the most feared man in New York's underworld, watched in stunned silence as his son, for the first time in 2 years, stopped destroying and started listening. The Moretti mansion in the Upper East Side stood like a fortress of marble and glass, its 40 rooms a testament to power that could buy anything except the one thing Tomas Moretti desperately needed: peace in his own home. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the latest casualties of his 8-year-old son's war against the world: shattered picture frames, torn curtains, and overturned furniture that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Serena Vasquez clutched her worn leather purse tighter as she approached the imposing front entrance. At 25, she had learned to hide her fears behind a mask of quiet determination, but this job felt different, dangerous. Not because of the man who lived here. She had grown up around dangerous men, but because she was about to enter a world she had sworn never to touch again. The brass nameplate gleamed. Moretti, the name that commanded respect and fear in equal measure throughout the 5 boroughs. Serena closed her eyes briefly, thinking of her mother's last words. "Mija, sometimes we must walk through darkness to find the light." She needed this job. Her savings had dwindled to $200. Her tiny studio apartment in Queens was 3 months behind on rent, and every other family had rejected her application the moment they heard her accent and saw her address. The Morettis were her last hope. The door opened before she could knock, revealing a stern-faced woman in her 50s wearing an expensive black dress. "Ms. Vasquez?" The woman's voice carried the crisp efficiency of someone used to managing chaos. "I'm Mrs. Chen, the house manager. Mr. Moretti is waiting in his office." Serena followed her through hallways that belonged in a museum. Original paintings worth millions adorned the walls, while marble sculptures stood sentinel in alcoves lit by crystal chandeliers. But beneath the beauty she sensed something broken, a house that had forgotten how to be a home. They passed what appeared to be a war zone, a sitting room where every cushion had been slashed, stuffing scattered like snow across Persian rugs that cost more than Serena had ever seen. Broken lamps lay in pieces, their crystal shards catching the light like fallen stars. "Master Damian's handiwork," Mrs. Chen explained without emotion. "He's spirited." Serena had seen destruction before. In her father's house in Guadalajara, violence had been a language spoken fluently by everyone except her mother. But this felt different. Not the calculated destruction of criminal anger, but the desperate flailing of a child drowning in grief. The office door was solid mahogany, carved with intricate designs that spoke of old-world craftsmanship. Mrs. Chen knocked twice and waited. "Enter." The voice that answered was deep, commanding, and carried an undertone that made Serena's survival instincts sharpen. She had heard voices like that before. Men who held life and death in their hands and never forgot it. Tomas Moretti sat behind a desk that could have doubled as a small aircraft carrier, his presence filling the room despite the space's enormous size. At 35, he was devastatingly handsome, in the way that dangerous men often were. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair perfectly styled, and eyes the color of storm clouds that seemed to see everything and forgive nothing. His tailored black suit probably cost more than Serena made in 6 months, but it was his hands that caught her attention. Large, powerful, with scars across the knuckles that told stories he would never share in polite company. These were hands that had built an empire and weren't afraid to destroy anyone who threatened it. Ms. Vasquez. He didn't stand, didn't smile, didn't offer any of the courtesies that normal employers might. His eyes studied her with the intensity of a predator evaluating potential prey. "Sit," Serena took the chair across from his desk, keeping her spine straight and her expression neutral. She had learned long ago that showing fear to powerful men was like bleeding in shark-infested waters. "You're the 15th nanny to apply for this position in the past 6 months," Thomas continued, his voice carrying a slight Italian accent that somehow made him even more intimidating. "The longest any of them lasted was 4 days. Most don't make it past the first hour. I'm not most people, Mr. Moretti." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps at her directness. "No? Then tell me, Ms. Vasquez, what makes you different from the Harvard-educated child development specialists, the British governesses with royal recommendations, and the Swiss boarding school matrons who all fled my house in tears?" Serena met his gaze steadily. "I understand broken children, sir, because I used to be one." The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Tomas leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled as he continued to study her. "Your references are sparse. No formal education in childcare, no experience with families of our social standing. Why should I trust you with my son?" "Because," Serena said quietly, "I'm not here to impress you or your social circle. I'm here to help a little boy who's hurting. And sometimes the best medicine for pain isn't found in textbooks or fancy credentials. Sometimes it's just found in understanding." A crash from somewhere in the house punctuated her words, followed by the sound of something expensive meeting its end. Tomas's jaw tightened, but he didn't even flinch. "That would be Damian," he said with the weary tone of a man who had heard that sound too many times. "He's difficult since his mother died 2 years ago." Serena's heart clenched. 2 years was a long time for a child to carry that kind of pain. "How did she die?" "Car accident." The words came out clipped, final. She was on her way to pick him up from school. He was supposed to be in the car with her, but he chose to stay home and play video games instead. Tomas's voice carried no emotion, but Serena could see the weight of guilt in the set of his shoulders. "He blames himself. And me." Another crash, this one closer. Serena could hear the sound of small feet running, followed by Mrs. Chen's voice calling out in exasperation. "The job pays $50,000 a year," Tomas said abruptly. "Room and board included. You'll live in the staff quarters and be available 24 hours a day. Damian doesn't sleep well, and when he doesn't sleep, no one in this house sleeps. $50,000. More money than Serena had ever dreamed of making. Enough to pay off her debts, maybe even save something for the future." But looking at Tomas Moretti's storm-grey eyes, she knew the price would be higher than the salary suggested. "There's one more thing," Tomas continued, his voice dropping to a tone that made Serena's skin prickle with warning. "I know you're not who you claim to be, Ms. Vasquez. I know about your family in Mexico. I know about the life you left behind." Serena's blood turned to ice. She had been so careful, changed her name, destroyed every connection to her past, but apparently not careful enough. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice betrayed her with the slightest tremor. Tomas smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "Serena Vasquez, daughter of Carlos Vasquez, lieutenant in the Guadalajara cartel. You disappeared 3 years ago when your mother got sick. The question is, are you running from them or are you working for them?" The room felt like it was closing in around her. Serena's hands gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles white with tension. "I left that world behind when my mother died. I swore I would never—" "Never what?" "Never return to a life of violence, never associate with criminals." Tomas's laugh was harsh. "Look around you, Ms. Vasquez. You're sitting in the home of one of the most powerful crime families on the East Coast. If you wanted to avoid criminals, you chose the wrong job interview." Serena stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the marble floor. "I should go. Sit down." The command in his voice was absolute, the tone of a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. Despite every instinct screaming at her to run, Serena found herself sinking back into the chair. "I'm not interested in your past," Tomas said, his voice softer now, but no less dangerous. "I'm interested in your future, specifically your ability to handle my son. Because if you can survive growing up in a cartel family, maybe, just maybe, you can survive Damian Moretti." As if summoned by his words, the office door burst open. A small figure stood in the doorway, dark hair wild with static, designer clothes torn and dirty, and eyes that burned with the same storm-grey intensity as his father's. But where Tomas's eyes held cold calculation, Damian's held nothing but raw, unfiltered pain. I don't want another stupid nanny, Damian screamed, his voice cracking with emotion. They're all the same. They all leave. Serena looked at the boy, really looked at him. Beneath the designer clothes and expensive haircut, she saw something achingly familiar. The rigid set of his small shoulders, the way his hands clenched into fists, the defiant tilt of his chin that couldn't quite hide the fear in his eyes. She had seen that same expression in her own mirror years ago, when her world had been nothing but violence and uncertainty. "Hello, Damian," she said quietly, not moving from her chair. "My name is Serena." "I don't care what your name is." Damian grabbed a crystal paperweight from his father's desk and hurled it at the wall. It shattered with a sound like breaking stars. "You'll just leave like all the others." Tomas started to rise, his face dark with anger, but Serena held up a gentle hand to stop him. She stood slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements, and walked toward the broken crystal. Then she did something that shocked both Moretti men. She sat down on the floor next to the glittering fragments and patted the marble beside her. "You know what, Damian? You're absolutely right. I probably will leave eventually. Most people do." Her voice was calm, conversational, as if they were discussing the weather instead of his emotional breakdown. "But right now, I'm here. And right now, you look like you could use someone to sit with you for a while." Damian stared at her, his chest heaving with the force of his emotions. You're not going to yell at me for breaking Papa's stuff." "Why would I yell at you?" Serena asked genuinely. "It's just a thing. Things can be replaced. But feelings are much more important than things." For a moment the room was so quiet that Serena could hear the tick of the antique clock on Tomas's desk. Damian's lower lip trembled, and she saw the exact moment when his carefully constructed walls began to crack. "I miss my mama," he whispered, the words barely audible. "I know you do, sweetheart," Serena replied, her own voice thick with emotion. "I miss my mama too." And then, as Tomas watched in stunned silence, his son, who hadn't let anyone comfort him in 2 years, walked over to Serena and collapsed into her arms, finally letting the tears fall. Serena's first night in the Moretti mansion was a symphony of destruction. Damian had accepted her presence during their emotional moment in Tomas's office, but acceptance and trust were two very different things. As darkness fell over Manhattan, the little boy's grief transformed into something wilder, more desperate. She found him in what had once been an elegant sitting room, systematically destroying everything within reach. Silk curtains hung in tatters, their golden threads scattered across the floor like confetti. A Ming vase lay in pieces near the fireplace, its 1,000-year history reduced to fragments in seconds. "Damian," Serena said softly from the doorway. She had changed from her interview clothes into simple jeans and a soft sweater, armor of a different kind for the battle ahead. He spun around, a crystal figurine raised above his head like a weapon. His face was streaked with tears and dirt, his dark hair wild with static. "Go away, I don't want you here." "I know you don't," Serena replied, stepping carefully around the debris. "But I'm not going anywhere tonight, so we might as well figure out how to be in the same space without killing each other." Damian's arm trembled with the weight of the figurine. "I'll break this too. It's worth more than your stupid car." Serena glanced at the delicate piece, a Waterford crystal ballerina probably worth more than she made in a month. "Okay, if breaking it will make you feel better, then break it." The unexpected response threw him off balance. You want me to break it?" "I want you to do whatever you need to do to get through tonight," Serena said honestly. "If that means breaking things, then break them. If it means screaming, then scream. If it means crying, then cry. I'll be right here no matter what you choose." Damian stared at her for a long moment, searching her face for the lie, the trick, the moment when she would reveal herself to be just like all the others. But Serena's expression remained steady, patient, genuinely caring. Slowly he lowered the figurine. "You're weird." "Yeah, I get that a lot." Serena smiled, and for the first time since entering the mansion, it felt genuine. "Mind if I sit down? It's been a long day." She settled onto the floor amid the destruction, leaning back against an overturned sofa. After a moment's hesitation, Damian sat down too, though he maintained careful distance between them. "Why aren't you scared of me?" he asked suddenly. "Everyone else is scared." Serena considered the question seriously. "Because I've known scarier 8-year-olds." "No, you haven't." "Oh, but I have." Serena's voice took on the cadence of a storyteller. "When I was little, I lived next door to a boy named Miguel. He was exactly your age and he was absolutely terrifying. He once tied firecrackers to his sister's doll and blew it up in the backyard. Despite himself, Damian looked intrigued. Really? Really? And you know why he did it? Because his papa had left and his mama cried all the time, and Miguel thought that if he made enough noise, maybe his papa would come home to see what all the fuss was about. Damian was quiet for a long moment. Did it work? No, Serena said gently. But you know what did work. When Miguel finally told his mama how scared he was that she would leave too, she held him and promised that no matter what happened, she would never, ever leave him on purpose. My mama left, Damian whispered. I know, baby, but not on purpose, never on purpose. They sat in comfortable silence as the Manhattan skyline glittered beyond the torn curtains. Serena could feel Damian's walls slowly crumbling, brick by careful brick. Serena. His voice was small in the darkness. Yes? Do you think my mama knows I break things? Serena's heart clenched. I think your mama knows everything about you. And I think she loves you just as much now as she did when she was here. Even when I'm bad? Especially when you're hurting. Damian scooted a little closer, though he tried to make it look casual. Will you tell me about your mama? And so serenaded. She told him about a woman who sang off-key while cooking, who grew the most beautiful flowers in the worst soil, who could make anyone laugh even when the world seemed determined to break them. She told him about strength that came not from violence but from love, about the kind of courage it took to choose gentleness in a harsh world. As she spoke, she noticed a figure in the doorway, Tomas, standing perfectly still, listening to every word. Their eyes met across the destroyed room and something passed between them, understanding perhaps, or recognition. When Serena finished her stories, Damian had fallen asleep against her shoulder, his small body finally relaxed for the first time in hours. She looked up to find Tomas approaching, his footsteps silent on the marble floor. He hasn't slept through the night in 2 years, Tomas said quietly, his voice filled with something that might have been wonder. He's exhausted, Serena replied, gently stroking Damian's hair. Grief is the most tiring emotion in the world. Tomas knelt beside them, and for a moment he looked less like a feared crime boss and more like a father who had forgotten how to help his own child. How did you know what to say to him? Because someone once said the same things to me. Serena met his eyes. When my father would disappear for days, when the house would shake with gunfire, when I thought the world was ending, my mother would hold me and tell me stories until I could breathe again. And when she died? Serena's smile was sad but genuine. I learned that the best way to honor someone's love is to pass it on to someone who needs it. Tomas was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the dim light. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone harder, more calculating. People from our world usually are. I'm not from your world anymore, Serena said firmly. I left that behind. Did you? Tomas's voice was soft but pointed. Because sitting here talking my son down from a breakdown, handling his violence without flinching, that takes a particular kind of strength, the kind that comes from experience. Serena shifted carefully, trying not to wake Damian. Maybe, but I choose how to use that strength now. I choose to build instead of destroy. And if your past comes looking for you, if the people you left behind decide they want you back, the question hung in the air between them, like a loaded gun. Serena had been asking herself the same thing for 3 years, ever since she had disappeared from Guadalajara, with nothing but a dying mother and a desperate hope for something better. Then I'll deal with it, she said simply. But I won't let it touch this little boy. He's been through enough. Tomas's expression shifted, something almost like respect flickering in his storm-grey eyes. Mrs. Chen will show you to your room. Damian's bedroom is next door. He has nightmares. I know. I can hear him from here. As if to prove her point, Damian whimpered in his sleep, his small hands clutching at Serena's sweater. She hummed softly, a Mexican lullaby her mother had sung to her, and watched as his face relaxed back into peaceful sleep. Serena, Tomas said as he stood to leave. Thank you. It was the first time he had used her name, and the way he said it, with something approaching warmth, made her chest tighten with an emotion she couldn't quite name. After he left, Serena sat in the destroyed room with a sleeping child in her arms and wondered what she had gotten herself into. The Moretti mansion was beautiful, and dangerous in equal measure, filled with secrets that could destroy her if she wasn't careful. But as Damian stirred against her shoulder and whispered "Mama" in his sleep, Serena knew she was already lost. This broken little boy had claimed a piece of her heart, and there was no going back now. Outside, the city that never slept continued its restless dance, unaware that in one mansion on the Upper East Side, a former cartel princess was learning that sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do was care about someone else's child more than your own safety. The real question wasn't whether she could save Damian Moretti. The question was whether she could save herself in the process. 3 weeks into her employment at the Moretti mansion, Serena had developed a routine that revolved entirely around Damian's emotional storms. She had learned to read the signs, the way his jaw tightened when he was about to explode, the particular silence that preceded his most destructive episodes, the exact moment when his grief transformed into rage. This morning, however, felt different, dangerous. Serena found Damian in his mother's former bedroom, a space that had been preserved exactly as Isabella Moretti had left it 2 years ago. Silk dresses still hung in the walk-in closet, their colors muted by dust and time. Perfume bottles stood sentinel on the vanity, their contents long since evaporated. And in the center of it all, Damian sat on the Persian rug, surrounded by the fragments of what had once been an entire collection of Venetian glass figurines. "Damian," Serena approached carefully, her bare feet silent on the marble floor. She had learned to move quietly in this house. Sudden sounds could trigger memories that sent the boy spiraling into darkness. He looked up at her with eyes that were too old for his 8-year-old face, tears cutting clean tracks through the dust on his cheeks. In his hands, he held the last unbroken piece, a delicate glass rose that caught the morning light like captured fire. "I can't do it," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I can't break this one." Serena settled beside him on the rug, careful not to disturb the glittering debris. "Why not?" "Because—" Damian's lower lip trembled. "Because she loved this one the most. She told me it reminded her of the roses in her mama's garden in Italy. And you've been breaking all the things she loved?" Damian nodded miserably. I thought if I broke everything she touched, maybe she would come back to fix them. She always fixed things when I broke them before. She would get sad, but then she would hug me and tell me that things didn't matter as much as people." Serena's heart shattered and rebuilt itself in the space of a single breath. The logic was so perfectly, heartbreakingly childish, the desperate reasoning of a little boy who would do anything to bring his mother back, even if it meant destroying everything beautiful in his world. "Oh, mi niño," she breathed, reaching out to touch his face gently. "Is that why you've been breaking everything? You're trying to make her come home." "But she's not coming," Damian sobbed, finally letting the glass rose fall from his trembling fingers. It hit the marble with a sound like a sigh, adding its pieces to the constellation of destruction around them. "I broke everything, and she's still not coming back." Serena pulled him into her arms, feeling his small body shake with the force of his grief. "She's not coming back because she can't, baby. Not because she doesn't want to, but because sometimes people we love have to go places we can't follow." "But I miss her so much," Damian cried against her shoulder. "I miss her so much it feels like my chest is going to explode." I know exactly how that feels." They sat together in the ruins of Isabella Moretti's memory, two broken souls finding solace in shared understanding. Serena rocked Damian gently, humming the same Mexican lullaby that had comforted her through her own darkest nights. "Serena?" Damian's voice was muffled against her sweater. "Yes, sweetheart. Do you think my mama is mad at me for breaking all her pretty things?" Serena pulled back to look at him, her hands framing his tear-stained face. "I think your mama understands that sometimes, when our hearts are broken, we break other things too. And I think she loves you so much that she could never be mad at you for hurting." "Really? Really? But Damian, I think maybe it's time to stop breaking things, because your mama's love isn't in these objects, it's in here." She placed her hand over his heart. "And here." She touched his forehead gently. "In all the memories you carry of her. And those things, those can never be broken." Damian was quiet for a long moment, processing her words with the serious concentration that only children could manage. "Will you help me clean up the glass?" "Of course." They worked together in comfortable silence, carefully collecting the fragments of Isabella's treasures. As they worked, Damian began to talk, really talk, for the first time since Serena had arrived. "Mama used to read to me in here," he said, pointing to the window seat overlooking Central Park. "She did all the voices for the characters, even the scary ones." "What was your favorite story?" "The one about the little prince who lived on an asteroid. Mama said that sometimes the most important things are invisible to the eye." Damian paused in his cleaning. "Do you think that's true?" "I think your mama was very wise." "She was the smartest person in the whole world," Damian said, with the absolute conviction of a child's love. "She spoke 4 languages and could solve math problems in her head, and she always knew when I was sad, even when I tried to hide it. She sounds wonderful." "She was." Damian's voice grew wistful. "She used to say that love was like planting flowers. You had to tend it every day, even when you couldn't see it growing." Serena's throat tightened with emotion. "That's beautiful, Damian." "I don't know how to tend love by myself," he admitted quietly. "I only know how to break things." "Then maybe," Serena said gently, "it's time to learn something new." They had just finished collecting the last of the glass when Tomas appeared in the doorway. Serena looked up to find him watching them with an expression she couldn't quite read. Surprise, perhaps, mixed with something that might have been hope. "Papa!" Damian scrambled to his feet, suddenly self-conscious about being caught in his mother's room. I didn't mean to." "It's okay, son," Tomas said quietly, stepping into the room for the first time in 2 years. His eyes swept over the space that had once belonged to his wife, and Serena saw his jaw tighten with suppressed emotion. "What were you doing in here?" Damian looked at Serena uncertainly, then back at his father. "I was breaking Mama's things, because I thought maybe if I broke them she would come back to fix them." The silence that followed was deafening. Tomas's face went through a series of emotions: shock, pain, understanding, and finally a grief so profound that Serena had to look away. "Damian," Tomas said, his voice rough with unshed tears, "your mama isn't coming back because you broke her things. She's not coming back because sometimes bad things happen to good people, and there's nothing anyone can do to change that." "But I should have been in the car with her," Damian whispered. "If I had gone to school that day instead of staying home to play games, maybe she wouldn't have died." Tomas's composure finally cracked. He crossed the room in 3 quick strides and pulled his son into his arms, holding him with a desperation that spoke of 2 years of suppressed emotion. "No," he said fiercely. "No, Damian. What happened to your mama was not your fault. It was never your fault. If you had been in that car—" His voice broke. "If you had been in that car, I would have lost both of you, and I couldn't have survived that." Serena watched father and son cling to each other in the ruins of Isabella's room, and she felt like an intruder on their private moment of healing. She started to back toward the door, but Tomas's voice stopped her. "Serena." He looked at her over Damian's head, his storm-grey eyes bright with unshed tears. "Thank you." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and slipped quietly from the room. But as she walked down the marble hallway, she could hear their voices, Tomas's deep and broken, Damian's high and hopeful, finally talking about the woman they had both loved and lost. It was a beginning, not an ending, but a beginning. And for the first time since arriving at the Moretti mansion, Serena allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, this broken family could learn to heal. But as she reached her own room, her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The words written in Spanish made her blood turn to ice. "We know where you are, Princesa. Time to come home." Serena stared at the screen, her hands trembling. The past she had tried so desperately to escape had found her, just as she was beginning to build something beautiful from the ashes of her old life. She thought of Damian's trusting face, of Tomas's grateful eyes, of the fragile healing that was just beginning to take root in this house of marble and secrets. And she knew that no matter what it cost her, she would not let her past destroy the future she was helping to build for this family, even if it meant facing the demons she had spent 3 years running from, even if it meant war. Serena stared at her phone screen until the words blurred together, her hands shaking so violently she nearly dropped the device. "We know where you are, Princesa. Time to come home." The message was from her cousin Diego, her father's nephew and current lieutenant in the Guadalajara cartel, the same man who had helped her escape 3 years ago when her mother was dying, who had promised to give her a head start before telling the family where she had gone. Apparently his protection had an expiration date. Serena sank onto her narrow bed in the staff quarters, her mind racing through possibilities and escape routes, with the efficiency born of a childhood spent in constant danger. She could disappear tonight, take the money she had saved, catch the first bus to anywhere and start over again with a new name and a new story. But then she thought of Damian's tear-stained face, of the breakthrough they had just achieved in his mother's room, of Tomas's grateful eyes when his son had finally opened up about his grief. She thought of the trust she was building, the healing that was just beginning, the family that was slowly learning to be whole again. She couldn't leave. Not now. Not when they needed her most. A soft knock on her door made her jump, her survival instincts kicking into overdrive. But when she opened it, she found Damian standing in the hallway, his dark hair mussed from sleep and his small hands clutching a worn stuffed elephant. "I had a bad dream," he whispered, his voice small and vulnerable in the darkness. Serena's heart clenched. Despite everything, the threats, the danger, the past that was closing in around her, this little boy's needs came first. They always would. "Come here, mi niño," she said softly, opening her arms. Damian flew into them, his small body trembling with the aftershocks of whatever nightmare had driven him from his bed. "I dreamed that you left," he confessed against her shoulder, "just like all the others. I dreamed that I woke up and you were gone, and I was all alone again." Serena's throat tightened with emotion. "I'm not going anywhere, Damian, I promise. But what if you change your mind? What if I'm too much trouble?" "Listen to me," Serena said, pulling back to look at him seriously. "You are not too much trouble. You are not too broken. You are not too difficult to love. You are a little boy who has been through something terrible, and you deserve all the patience and kindness in the world while you heal." Damian's eyes filled with tears. "Really? Really? And I'm going to be right here while you figure out how to be okay again." They settled on Serena's small bed, Damian curled against her side while she stroked his hair and hummed the lullabies her mother had sung to her. But even as she comforted him, her mind was working, calculating, planning. Diego wouldn't have sent that message unless he was already close. The cartel didn't make idle threats. They made promises. And if they wanted her back badly enough to track her across 2 countries and 3 years of careful hiding, then they had a very good reason. Serena closed her eyes, remembering the night she had fled Guadalajara. Her mother was dying, the medical bills were crushing them, and her father's enemies were closing in. Diego had offered her a choice: marry the son of a rival cartel leader to cement a peace treaty, or watch her mother die without treatment. She had chosen a third option, disappearing into the night with her mother and what little money she could steal from her father's safe. Now her mother was dead. Serena had built a new life, and the cartel wanted their wayward princess back. The question was, what were they willing to do to get her? "Serena?" Damian's sleepy voice interrupted her dark thoughts. "Yes, sweetheart. Are you scared of anything?" The question caught her off guard. "Why do you ask?" "Because you're never scared when I break things or when Papa gets angry or when the thunder is really loud. But right now you feel scared. I can tell." Serena marveled at the child's intuition. "You're very observant, Damian. Mama used to say I had good instincts about people. She said it was a gift." He looked up at her with serious eyes. "So are you scared?" Serena considered lying, but something in Damian's expression told her he would see right through any deception. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "I am scared." "Of what?" "Of people from my past who want me to go back to a life I don't want anymore." Damian was quiet for a moment, processing this information with the gravity of a much older child. "Is that why you left Mexico? Because of bad people?" "Yes." "And now they found you?" Serena's heart clenched at his perceptiveness. "I think so." "Are you going to leave us?" The question was asked in such a small, vulnerable voice that Serena felt her resolve crystallize into something unbreakable. She looked down at this brave, broken little boy who had already lost so much, and she made a decision that would change everything. "No," she said firmly, "I'm not going to leave you. No matter what happens, I'm going to stay and fight for this family. Even if the bad people come here? Especially if they come here." Damian smiled for the first time since his nightmare, and Serena felt something shift inside her chest. She had spent 3 years running from her past, trying to escape the violence and danger that had shaped her childhood, but maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to fight. The next morning brought an unexpected complication in the form of Tomas Moretti standing outside her door at 6 a.m., his expression grim and his usually perfect appearance slightly disheveled. "We need to talk," he said, without preamble. Serena's stomach dropped. About what? About the 3 men in expensive suits who have been asking questions about you in the neighborhood, about the fact that my security team intercepted communications suggesting that certain parties from Mexico are very interested in your current location. His storm grey eyes bored into hers. About the fact that you've brought danger to my house and my son. Serena's blood turned to ice. She had underestimated Tomas's resources, his connections, his ability to monitor threats to his family. Of course he would know about Diego's people. Of course he would have been watching. I can explain, she began, but Tomas held up a hand to stop her. My office, now. The walk to Tomas's study felt like a death march. Serena's mind raced through possible explanations, excuses, ways to minimize the danger she had brought to this house. But when they reached the office and Tomas closed the door behind them, his first words surprised her. How much trouble are you in? Serena blinked, caught off guard by the directness of the question. What? It's a simple question, Serena. How much trouble are you in, and what do these people want from you? She studied his face, looking for signs of anger or betrayal, but found only grim determination. You're not firing me. That depends on your answer. Serena took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would determine not only her future, but Damian's as well. My father was Carlos Vasquez, lieutenant in the Guadalajara cartel. When I was 22, they wanted me to marry the son of a rival family to cement a peace treaty. I refused and disappeared with my dying mother. And now they want you back. Yes, my cousin sent me a message last night. They know I'm here. Tomas was quiet for a long moment. His fingers steepled as he processed this information. What happens if you don't go back? They'll come for me, and anyone who gets in their way becomes collateral damage, including Damian. It wasn't a question, and Serena's silence was answer enough. Tomas's jaw tightened, and she saw the exact moment when his protective instincts kicked into overdrive. How long do we have? Serena's heart skipped. We? You're part of this family now, Serena. And I protect what's mine. His voice carried the cold certainty of a man who had never lost a war. How long? I don't know. Maybe days. Maybe hours. Tomas nodded grimly and reached for his phone. Then we prepare for war. As Serena watched him make calls to people whose names she didn't recognize, but whose reputations preceded them, she realized that she had just crossed a line from which there was no return. She was no longer Serena Vasquez, runaway cartel princess trying to disappear into anonymity. She was Serena Moretti's nanny, under the protection of one of the most powerful crime families in New York, and God help anyone who tried to take her away from the little boy who had become her whole world. The war for her freedom was about to begin. The attack came at dawn, just as Serena was helping Damian with his breakfast. The first sign of trouble was the sudden silence. No birds singing in the garden, no traffic noise from the street. Even the mansion's usual sounds seemed muted by an unnatural quiet. Serena's survival instincts, honed by years in her father's house, kicked in immediately. Damian, she said quietly, setting down his orange juice with steady hands, I need you to go to the safe room, right now. But I'm not finished eating. Now, mi niño. Remember what your papa taught you about the safe room? Damian's eyes widened as he recognized the tone in her voice, the same one his mother had used during the few times when Tomas's enemies had gotten too close. Without another word, he slipped from his chair and ran toward the hidden panel behind the kitchen pantry. Serena was right behind him when the first explosion shattered the morning calm. The mansion's reinforced windows held, but the message was clear. Diego hadn't come to negotiate. Serena! Tomas's voice echoed through the house, sharp with command and edged with something that might have been fear. Not for himself. Serena was beginning to understand that Tomas Moretti feared very little, but for his son. She found him in the main hallway, already dressed in tactical gear and surrounded by men whose faces she recognized from her childhood nightmares. These weren't just bodyguards. They were soldiers, the kind of men who made problems disappear permanently. Is Damian secure? Tomas asked without preamble. Safe room, just like you taught him. Good. His storm-grey eyes met hers, and Serena saw something there that made her breath catch. This ends today, Serena. One way or another. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Diego's name flashed on the screen, and Tomas nodded grimly. Answer it. Put it on speaker. Serena's hands trembled slightly as she accepted the call. Diego. Prima. Her cousin's voice was warm, affectionate, completely at odds with the violence he had just unleashed on the mansion. You look beautiful this morning. Motherhood suits you. Serena's blood turned to ice. If Diego could see her, that meant he had surveillance on the house, which meant he knew about Damian. What do you want? She asked, proud that her voice remained steady. You know what I want. You've had your little adventure, played house with the pretty Italian boy, but it's time to come home. The family needs you. I'm not family anymore. I left that world behind. Diego's laugh was cold, calculating. Did you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you just traded one crime family for another. Tell me, Prima, does your new boss know about the blood on your hands? Does he know what you did the night you left Guadalajara? Serena's face went white. Beside her, she felt Tomas's attention sharpen, but she couldn't look at him, couldn't bear to see the moment when he realized that she wasn't the innocent victim she had pretended to be. That's different, she whispered. Is it? You killed 3 men that night, Serena, shot them in cold blood to protect your dying mother, and now you're playing nanny to a crime boss's son, pretending to be something you're not. Diego's voice turned silky, dangerous, but we both know the truth. Violence is in your blood, just like it's in mine. You can run from it, but you can't escape what you are. Serena closed her eyes, remembering that terrible night. Her mother's medical equipment beeping frantically, the men breaking down their door, her father's gun heavy in her hands as she made a choice that would haunt her forever. I was protecting my mother, she said quietly, and now you're protecting another child. How noble. How predictable. Diego's tone shifted, becoming businesslike. Here's what's going to happen, Prima. You're going to walk out of that pretty mansion, get in the car that's waiting for you, and come home. If you do this quietly, the boy lives. If you don't, the threat hung in the air like poison. Serena felt Tomas's hand on her shoulder, steady and warm, anchoring her to the present moment. And if I refuse? Then I burn this place to the ground with everyone inside, starting with the child. The line went dead. Serena stared at the phone, her mind racing through possibilities, and finding none that didn't end in blood. Diego had her trapped, and they both knew it. She would do anything to protect Damian, even return to a life that would slowly destroy her soul. Serena. Tomas's voice was quiet, controlled, but she could hear the steel beneath the surface. Look at me. She turned to face him, expecting to see disgust, betrayal, the moment when he realized that he had invited a killer into his home. Instead, she found understanding. How many? He asked simply. 3. They were going to kill my mother for the medical bills we couldn't pay. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, Tomas said quietly. You chose to protect someone you loved. That doesn't make you a monster, Serena. That makes you family. Serena's eyes filled with tears. Tomas, I have to go. If I don't, he'll hurt Damian. No. The word was absolute, final. You're not going anywhere. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Tomas's hands framed her face, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had started to fall. I understand that you're the first person to make my son laugh in 2 years. I understand that you've brought light back into this house, and I understand that I would burn the world down before I let anyone take you away from us. Serena's breath caught. Tomas, I love you, he said simply, as if the words weren't earth-shattering, as if they weren't standing in a mansion under siege while her past tried to drag her back into darkness. I love your strength, your gentleness, the way you see the best in people even when they can't see it themselves. I love how you've healed my son, how you've healed me, and I'll be damned if I let some cartel punk take that away. But Damian will be protected, just like you will be protected, just like this family will be protected. Tomas's voice carried the cold certainty of a man who had never lost a war. You belong to me now, Serena Vasquez, and I protect what's mine. Before Serena could respond, an explosion rocked the mansion, closer this time. Through the reinforced windows she could see black SUVs surrounding the property, men in tactical gear taking positions behind cover. Sir, one of Tomas's men approached, his expression grim. They've got the house surrounded. Estimate 20 men, military-grade weapons. Tomas nodded, his transformation from lover to war general instantaneous. Positions. North and south entrances covered. They're trying to breach the east wall. Let them come. Tomas's smile was sharp, predatory. It's been too long since we've had a proper fight. As his men dispersed to their positions, Tomas turned back to Serena. Stay with Damian. No matter what happens, you stay with my son. What are you going to do? What I should have done the moment they threatened my family. Tomas's eyes were cold as winter storms. "I'm going to remind them why people fear the Moretti name." He kissed her then, hard and desperate and full of promises that might never be kept. When he pulled away, Serena saw her own fear reflected in his eyes, not fear of death, but fear of losing what they had just found. "Tomas," she whispered, "I love you too." His smile was brilliant, transformative. "Then we have something worth fighting for." The battle for Serena's freedom and their future was about to begin. Serena ran toward the safe room, her heart pounding with terror and hope in equal measure. As gunfire erupted throughout the mansion, she thought of Damian's trusting face, of Tomas's fierce protection, of the family she had found in the most unlikely place. She had spent 3 years running from her past. Today, she would stand and fight for her future. And sometimes when everything is broken, all we need is someone to reach out with gentle kindness. Sometimes that kindness saves everyone. Years later, the sound of laughter echoed through the Moretti mansion's garden, where Serena sat on a blanket beneath the ancient oak tree, watching Damian chase butterflies with the determined focus of a 12-year-old on a mission. The scars from that terrible morning 3 years ago had faded, both the physical ones on the mansion's walls and the emotional ones in their hearts. "Mama Serena, look," Damian called out, cupping his hands carefully around a monarch butterfly. "I caught one." "Let it go, mi niño," Serena called back, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly where Tomas's daughter grew strong and safe. "Beautiful things are meant to be free." Damian opened his hands, and they watched together as the butterfly spiraled up toward the cloudless sky. At 12, he had grown tall and lean, with his father's storm-grey eyes and his mother's gentle heart. The rage that had once consumed him had transformed into something beautiful, a fierce protectiveness for the people he loved and an unshakable belief in the power of kindness. "Serena." Tomas's voice was warm with contentment as he approached, carrying a tray of iced tea and the sandwiches she had been craving all morning. At 38, he moved with the same predatory grace that had first caught her attention, but the hard edges had softened. Love had taught him that true strength came not from inspiring fear, but from inspiring devotion. "How are my girls today?" he asked, settling beside her on the blanket and placing a gentle hand on her rounded belly. "Active," Serena Lord, covering his hand with hers. "I think she's going to be a dancer." "God help us all," Tomas murmured, but his eyes were bright with joy. "One strong-willed Moretti woman in this house is already more than I can handle." Serena leaned into his embrace, marveling at how perfectly she fit against his side. The mansion that had once felt like a beautiful prison now felt like home, filled with laughter and music and the kind of love that grew stronger with each passing day. The cartel war had ended 3 years ago in a single brutal night. Diego's body had been found floating in the Hudson River, along with most of his men. The message had been clear. The Moretti family was not to be touched. Serena's past had been buried with her cousin, and she had never looked back. "Papa, Mama Serena, come see." Damian's excited voice drew their attention to the far end of the garden, where he was kneeling beside the rose bushes they had planted together the previous spring. "The Isabella roses are blooming." Serena's throat tightened with emotion. They had named the roses after Damian's birth mother, and watching them bloom felt like a blessing, a sign that love could grow even in soil that had once known only grief. "They're beautiful," Serena said softly as they approached the bush heavy with white blooms. "Your mama would have loved them." "I know," Damian said with the quiet confidence of a child who had learned to carry love instead of pain. "I can feel her sometimes when I'm out here. She's happy that we're happy." Tomas's arm tightened around Serena's waist, and she knew he was thinking the same thing she was, that Isabella's greatest gift to them hadn't been her memory, but her son, the little boy who had brought them together and taught them both that the most broken things could become the most beautiful when tended with patience and love. "Damian," Tomas said quietly, "there's something your Mama Serena and I want to tell you." Damian looked up from the roses, his expression curious but unguarded, so different from the suspicious, angry child Serena had first met 3 years ago. "What is it, Papa?" Tomas glanced at Serena and she nodded encouragingly. They had discussed this moment for weeks, waiting for the right time, the perfect setting. "We want to make our family official," Tomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "Serena and I are getting married, and we want you to be my best man." Damian's face lit up like the 4th of July. "Really? You mean..." Serena will really be my mama. Forever, if you'll have me, Serena said softly, kneeling down to his level despite her growing belly. I know I can never replace your first mama, but you're not replacing her, Damian interrupted, throwing his arms around Serena's neck. You're adding to her. Mama Isabella gave me life, but Mama Serena, you gave me love again. Serena's eyes filled with tears as she held this brave, beautiful boy who had taught her that the greatest courage wasn't found in violence or revenge, but in choosing to love again after loss. There's one more thing, Tomas said, his voice suspiciously rough. We've been thinking about names for your sister. Oh, Damian pulled back, his eyes bright with excitement. Can I help choose? Actually, Serena said, smiling through her tears, we were hoping you might like the name Isabella. Isabella Rose Moretti. Damian's breath caught. You want to name her after my first mama? We want to honor the woman who gave us the most precious gift in the world, Tomas said quietly. You. Damian was quiet for a long moment, his young face serious as he processed the magnitude of what they were offering. Then slowly a smile spread across his features, not the wild, desperate grin of a child trying to hide his pain, but the genuine, peaceful smile of a boy who finally understood that he was loved completely, unconditionally, forever. I think, he said solemnly, that both my mamas would like that very much. As the three of them stood together in the garden where Isabella's roses bloomed in the afternoon sun, Serena marveled at the journey that had brought them here. She had come to this mansion as a broken woman running from her past, hired to care for a broken child who was destroying everything beautiful in his world. But sometimes, the most broken things could become the most beautiful when tended with gentle kindness. Sometimes love could transform even the darkest places into gardens where hope could grow. And sometimes, when you stopped running from your past and started building toward your future, you discovered that home wasn't a place at all. It was the people who chose to love you, scars and all, and never let you go. The Moretti family was complete at last, built not from blood alone but from choice, from sacrifice, from the radical decision to reach out with gentle kindness when the world seemed determined to break them. In the distance, church bells chimed the hour, and Serena smiled as she felt her daughter kick against her ribs, strong and fierce, just like her brother, just like her father, just like the woman who would raise her to believe that love was always worth fighting for. The little girl who would grow up knowing that families weren't just born, they were chosen, they were built, they were tended like gardens until they bloomed into something beautiful enough to last forever.